Hey gang, my name is Steve Guttenberg. This is the Audiophiliac Daily Show, and today it's an interview with my friend Beau. Now I've known Beau 5, 6, 7 years, something like that, not that long. He's a marine biologist for the city of New York, so he's a scientist. And as we were starting this interview, we were talking about analog versus digital, that sort of thing. He didn't want to be pinned down, but I'll tell you right up front, he is an analog guy. He enjoys digital. He's a big believer in Roon, but he's analog. And anyway, let's just get right to the interview, starting now.
I grew up with vinyl. There were no CDs when I was a kid. With my dad's system, which is how I was introduced to audio, we would help out. We would do the records. And then, the typical things you hear, the non-technical things you hear, the cover art, so much better.
Right.
You can actually read something on the physical piece of equipment instead of having to either get a magnifying glass or just look it up on the internet or something.
Right.
So you can read it stuff. And it's the physical act of doing it is also, gives you some sense of stability, and it gets you up off the sofa.
Yeah, that's good.
For a little while to either flip a record or change it.
I like that. And by the way, you're the guy who gave me the line that you signed up immediately to Roon.
Correct.
So you're not opposed to digital things.
No, I am not opposed to digital at all.
Roon. You were playing Roon before I got
That is correct. We've had this discussion before about, are you a music audiophile or are you equipment audiophile? I won't deny being in either camp.
I'm looking around here.
I have a lot of equipment.
I have a lot of gear.
I believe the music, the music is an excuse to buy the equipment to play it in a way that you enjoy, is really what it is.
Sure.
But a good example of what we were talking about earlier with digital versus vinyl, I'm not going to tell you that I sit down and seriously listen to vinyl. There's no serious listening as far as I'm concerned. I enjoy listening to music all the time. I'm not interested in becoming the way I hear people talk about where you have a suck out at 100 kilohertz. When you break down music like that, it's no fun anymore.
Okay.
Fun anymore to me. I've listened for people like that, and they've said I've heard the same things they are. Maybe they're just making it up. I don't know.
Maybe.
But so I think I can hear, but who knows? But I'll listen to Roon or digital. That's pretty much what I have from a digital system while I'm cooking or while I'm doing something else in the house. Because when you're doing something you can't get up from,
sure,
you with dirty hands, it's hard to flip a record,
right?
Or change. Exactly, you shouldn't do it. But when you want to sit and enjoy, I had people over the other night. We sat down and listened to a few records, so it's always interesting, and it is different these days. So if you have somebody come over that's not an audiophile, they always say, "Oh, you play records?" And so you play a few for them, and they go, "Wow, it does sound like pretty good." And I will say that given my proclivities as an audiophile, it was easier for me to acquire a close to state-of-the-art vinyl system versus a digital system. Now, I'm not a big believer in, even though I'm a scientist, not a big believer in high tech as far as it applies, as you can see as you look around.
Yeah, a lot of old tech.
I've got a lot of old tech lying around, and so $150,000 turntable, it's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. But a good digital system, I would say at the lower ranges, a good vinyl system will beat a good digital system.
Okay, so we're back. So these are your Tannoys.
Yes, Tannoy Glenairs. They're the 15-inch version. That's a dual concentric driver, typical Tannoy. Works well with single-ended that I have. It's their version of the Prestige range, their version of a sort of a normal-looking speaker.
And it's made in Scotland.
I believe it was, yes, made in England. And I've had them for about a decade or so.
And this amp?
The amp is a single-ended 50 amp, puts out about 4 watts. Solid brass chassis and vintage Tango and military grade components, so that you can actually put your hand on the amp on any of the transformers while it's in motion.
It's made by Steve Berger.
It's made by Steve Berger.
Okay. And then this guy here.
That's what I'm actually listening to now. That's one of the first watt SIT amps. It's the stereo version, the latest SIT 3 version. Just trying it out in the system.
Okay.
I've borrowed it from a friend.
All right.
That is my mono rig, which is a Empire 208 turntable that has been sort of modernized by a guy in Connecticut, Analog Engineering. Instead of the typical plinth, that's a solid aluminum plinth. He CNC'd out, and all the components were sort of polished up, cleaned up, and upgraded. And it's an Abus arm on it. There's no cartridge on it at the moment, but the arm is from Abus. They don't actually make that version anymore. They make something similar. So
yeah, I had an Empire back in the day. It did not look nearly as pretty as this, though. Definitely not. It was pretty clunky.
And it's on a -K passive vibration control
wow,
stand.
how tweaky.
Oh, yeah.
And then this.
I used to have wood floors. That is the most recent addition to my system. That is a Bent Audio Tap X sort of preamp distributor. It's passive. It's got Dave Slagle's autoformers inside. They don't make that component anymore. I just obtained it. It helps me because I needed more inputs than I had. So it has 6 inputs on the back, and that's why I have it.
And then this table, whoa.
That is a Fairchild 750, an old broadcast table. It's got a 16-inch platter on it. It's in an OMA slate plinth. It's been sort of repurposed, and there's a Schick arm and a Miyajima Kansui cartridge on it.
Good. Wow. And some shit.
That
box at least.
That's a shit Saga that
okay.
I was using in place, but I have the Tap X now.
Okay.
The tube amp there is a gray tube amp. It's from a mono system that I have, mid-century modern sort of mono system. I have the turntable buried. I'm planning on putting that together and either putting it in my office or somewhere in the house. It's a total mono system. So that's the only amp that's there.
And these Bell Cantos?
That's my Bell Canto digital DAC. That's the entire DAC 3.5 with the RefStream RefStream reference USB converter. I'm running a Mac Mini, and the battery's power supply is below.
Okay.
So.
And then the Wadia?
And the Wadia 860X. When I do play CD players, that's what I use. Or play CDs, that's what I use.
And that's it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's in the system now.
And then lots and lots of records.
Lots and lots of records. Unfortunately, I had a shelf fail the other day, so they're all on the floor. I have to.
Yeah, so everybody out there is going to get weird about that. Like, no, they're not always on the floor.
Nope, they are. I had a shelf fail the other day. You can pan around to the failed shelf if you'd like.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
And they were all on the floor for a while, but usually they are not. They're usually up on shelves like that. So I grew up, my dad had old Macintosh tube electronics. He stopped playing his stereo for a period of time, and then coincidentally, when I came up here, he wanted to restart. He, at the time, didn't want to deal with tubes. I'm just too tired to deal with tubes, so we ended up buying a system from Air, the company Air.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. He went with that. And so at the same time, I was also, at that time, I was trying to get back into, I'm not one of these people that you can have this chain of, I've had a system my whole entire life. I went off to college. I did not have much of what you would call a system.
Did you have a system when you were in high school?
My at home, yes, my dad's system.
Oh.
You know.
But not your own.
Not my own. No.
Interesting.
No, I lived in an attic room. I had a shortwave radio that I could listen to blues from Chicago on. That kind of stuff.
And you were in New Orleans.
I was in Louisiana.
Sorry.
I grew up in Louisiana.
Isn't all of Louisiana New Orleans?
Well, most people think so, but it's not true. So when I was getting back into it, I ended up with Lynn system, an entire Lynn system, solid state Lynn system. You know, it was
with Lynn speakers too.
With Lynn speakers, everything. I still have their Kayleys, the Lynn Kayleys. I still have them in a storage unit somewhere.
And what were they like?
LK100s, a stack of whatever you want to call it, a 6-pack, whatever
really?
the name
That's
was.
Pretty serious stuff.
Yeah, it was. I had the turntable too, but I had CD player, everything. It was a whole stack.
Got any pictures?
No, I do not.
Yeah. Okay.
And then so all that was happening. I got that, and then I came in and I ended up meeting our mutual friend Herb a little bit at his store Phi. Back when
really? That far back?
Oh yeah. Well, I met them, but I didn't know them.
Oh, okay.
I would go into Phi. I had just started working for the city of New York, and I was making no money at all. And I saw these exotic electronics, and I said, "Just what are they?" And then Phi closed, went away, and it was like, too bad. But I had the Lynn system for a decade or so, and then unfortunately, in this very apartment, we had a nice flood that took out all my electronics. And then I said, let me, research the system. I spent about 1.5 2 years just listening everywhere, luckily you live in New York. There were this was 10, 15 years ago, lots of options.
Right.
And as people talk about audio dying, but I see more options than I've ever seen before to get into the whatever branch of music listening you would like. Honestly, I love single-in electronics and I love big horns, but I'll go listen to somebody's system that's the hardcore solid state. I don't want to, denigrate any one firm, but say Magico as the box speaker avatar, I'll go listen to their system and I'll enjoy listening to that too. I'm not sitting there plugging my ears up when I'm listening to other people's systems. I can tell you that I wouldn't buy that.
Yeah, well.
And I wouldn't want it in my apartment to live with. I wouldn't want to live with it long term. Well, if you gave me something for free, I would probably listen to it for a while. But, yeah, do that.
Yeah, well, no, it's a good time and I enjoy it.
To people now, what's interesting is the next format du jour is tape. And I am never going to get back. I have some tapes around somewhere, and I had a tape recorder, but that's a storage issue. There's limited availability, and then takes one tape is 2 or 3 LPs, depending on how thick you are. So you have less space to store all this stuff.
I mean, whatever floats your boat, but I don't really get the whole tape thing because what are you going to play? Copies of your records, copies of your CDs, or supposedly, this tape was copied right off the master. Yeah, right.
I will more than happily go to people, and I know several people that have great systems that have all 3 formats. I will listen to whatever they play.
Yeah, of course.
And
whatever makes you happy.
But they also have the space to put it in.
Yeah. Well, they're not in New York.
And you obviously, growing up in the 70s, you were in the South. There was the Molly Hatchet, Leonard Skinner, all that kind of stuff on the radio being played. But I would college, I guess, was my first experience using my own money to buy my records to play on someone else's turntable because I didn't have a turntable in my dorm room at the time. So
I'm sure a lot of people did. So
yeah, exactly. And it's been intermittent because I bought a lot of CDs. I would buy a lot of CDs to explore new stuff because when I don't tell this story often, but when I went to school in Austin, Texas, and listened to a lot of live music there. Yeah. So that wasn't really, recorded music wasn't really a big thing for me back in college. It was either the radio or going out to a club.
Yeah, well, you were in Austin.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And so I came up to Long Island, and at that time, when you think back on it, I was exposed to a fairly limited genre of music, or I missed a whole bunch of stuff, just either out of ignorance or just having too much fun. But I think I've told you the story that I saw, Stevie Ray Vaughan a few times, live before that was
Austin?
in 81 or 82,
With
that
his
kind
brother?
of things. He was playing with his brother at the time, I believe. Jimmy Vaughan. But
with the Fabulous Thunderbirds.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, honestly, I can't remember.
Okay.
And then I know I saw him as a headliner
Uh-huh.
because the weirdest concert I've ever seen in my life was Stevie Ray Vaughan as an opener and The Clash as the main act.
Yeah, how'd that go over?
There was a lot of people that left after the first
okay.
was interesting, but I came up to New York and I had sort of missed out on a whole bunch. I found out I missed out on a whole bunch of stuff because the friend that I came up to New York with, they dragged me to a show. I cannot remember the name of the club, but it was in Sheepshead Bay.
Okay.
And I walked into this crazy mob of people, and it turned out it was the Ramones on stage at some club down in Sheepshead Bay.
Welcome to New York.
Welcome to New York.
You can't get more New York.
That was for the life of me. I could not get over that.
You're on another planet.
For the life of and I appreciate that kind of weird. It's just all kinds of music. I mean, if I had to pick one thing that's been constant in my life, I'd say blues. I've listened to the blues a lot growing up. I mean, I would tune into those. Those are the AM stations you could get out of Chicago or wherever on my shortwave radio a little bit. So I just enjoy listening to blues music.
When you get back to Stevie Ray though, when you saw him, did you say like he's like the next Jimi Hendrix? That's what I thought when I saw him the first time.
I'd like to say that I did, but I probably didn't.
Okay.
I knew you could tell he was good, and he was one of those people like Jimi Hendrix that when you're on stage, you can tell he's going to either play or die. I mean, he is 100% into his. He was 100% into his playing.
He had amazing charisma beyond his playing.
He was definitely very stage presence, I guess is the word everybody's looking for. And people would go to see him. There are definitely acts that are better live than anything you'll ever see. And then there's the reverse.
Right. Yeah.
That, my example is the Cars. I know they were just elected into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but that was one of the worst concerts I'd ever seen in my life.
They could have had a bad night.
Outside, another one that I know has had a bad night. Another bad concert was Elvis Costello one night.
Oh, no, I've seen him plenty.
I've seen him a couple of times, and it was just I think it was just could have been a bad sound system. I was in Madison Square Garden, so. But, that's the thing, is it's always fun, and really always fun to go see people in small places if you can. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've done a lot of that recently. I don't hardly go to any big shows anymore. I go to small places.
Yeah,
small clubs.
I can't imagine who I would go to Madison Square Garden to see.
What, you haven't seen the Billy Joel sell out 900 concerts in a row?
No,
or whatever he sold out?
It's never a big...
For me, in my life, jazz is a relatively recent affliction, I guess is the best way to call it. I met people, Steve Berger for one, who plays jazz, and then you start, you understand. I mean, look, it's always been, you knew who they were, but you're not sitting there trying to. Jazz is one of those things where you learn that you have to be an educated consumer or you're out of the loop for some people because there's history and there's all these who plays with who and all this other stuff that goes along. And I'm a neophyte where that comes. I've never been one. I'm not going to trace the history of a band based on who was their drummer,
right,
and that kind of thing. And so,
but on Rune, it's so easy to do.
Exactly, on Rune makes it so much easier to do on this in the format. So I'm learning, a lot of things that I'm either buying or listening to are jazz that tend to be jazz now. So
interesting. Yeah. Well, it's being an audiophile, I always say, is a journey, but so is appreciating music through your life.
Correct.
What you like when you're a teenager is not going to be what you like when you're 50 or 60. Correct. For the most part.
I like all different kinds.
Yeah. But as you age, you move on and you find new kinds of music that you didn't like before.
Correct.
Like I love Sinatra now. I never did. That's like relatively recent for me that I get it. Like now I totally see why he's a big deal.
Okay.
And I didn't for a while. So he's got a nice voice, but I don't know. But now it's like, yes, he sings rings around Mick Jagger, even the young Mick Jagger. It's just like there's no comparison.
Well, yeah, it's different. I mean, that's
No, it's not just different. He's just better.
well, but it's also personal preference. I mean, you know, do you like? There are people that'll argue over Sinatra versus Tony Bennett. I go, why can't you listen to both?
Of course.
It's,
Well, you're a peacemaker kind of guy.
Yeah, well, that's true. I listen to most anything, and I'm not going to argue over who's better. It's always just, you know, how do you do what's best?
It's not better.
You know,
just play what you want to play.
it's just, you know,
it's not more complicated.
Exactly. Play a little bit of everything.
This is goodbye.
Goodbye. Thanks for coming. It was a pleasure sharing my system with you.
My guest today is Beau, and his really nice Brooklyn loft. It's a really nice place.
Thank you.
I've always thought so.
Thank you.
See you soon. Thanks for letting me do this.
All right, no problem.
Bye-bye.
Come again.
I will.